First, I want to thank all of you for being here. I see a lot of people that are a part of what we call the Legacy Project in the room, so thanks for supporting your teammates. I'm going to get out my glasses because I'm going to get nervous. Today, we're going to discuss some of the hurdles the Emerald Triangle Legacy operators have faced, the vast collections of genetics they hold, some of the solutions being created to empower both the operators and the genetic diversity, and how not integrating the knowledge and the genetics these legacies impact the future of medicine and science around cannabis. In 2014, Humboldt County claimed over 10,000 small medical cannabis farmers. Today, we have less than 1,300 cannabis licenses in Humboldt and Trinity County. These communities hold over 6 decades of experience with breeding, cultivation practices, and medicine making around cannabis and are being shut out of the new industry. The new industry that was legalized around the premise that cannabis is a very diverse medicine. Yet, as this industry grows and the legacies get shut out, we are losing vast amounts of important genetics, research, and experience that can move us all forward towards a healthier future. I'd like to introduce to you some of our Legacy Project leaders in our panel today. Rob Golightly, at the end over there, is the co-owner of Lost Coast Distribution and a 25-year medical cannabis farmer. Daniel Hendricks is the co-owner and CEO of Hendricks Farms, as well as a native of Humboldt County. Jeff Hamilton is partner at Farella, Braun & Martell, LLP, and founder of Canopy Right. And Dr. Dale Hunt is senior attorney of Plant & Planet Law Firm and founder of Breeders Best. Hi, guys. Jeff, why don't we just kind of all say a few things about ourselves and our experiences, and then we'll dive into the questions. Jeff, you want to start?
Sure. Can everyone hear me? I'm a partner at Farella, Braun & Martell in San Francisco. I focus on cannabis transactional work. I'm also the founder of a company called Canopy Right, which is attempting to build a blockchain-based botanical registry for cannabis cultivars. I discovered the plant as a teenager. I was sort of like a anxious, lonely, high-strung kid, and all of a sudden there was this miracle that made my life better and gave me this opportunity to find self-confidence and sort of organize my life and really think through my problems. And so as a lawyer, when I got the opportunity to start working with cannabis clients, I never learned back. And so what I'm focusing on right now is really the issue that we're going to talk about as a group today. I think I will leave it at that.
Awesome, thanks. Daniel?
Hello, everybody. I'm Daniel Hendricks. I was born in my backyard in Humboldt County to 2 Humboldt undergraduate students, and I feel like symbolically I've always followed the plant. It was 1996 when the Compassionate Care Act passed. I was a freshman in high school, and I knew that was something that I really wanted to pursue. I saw a change in politics and the global view of cannabis, and I hoped I could be part of that. So we founded Hendricks Farms. It's a nursery that focuses on preservation and delivery of powerful and endemic to Humboldt County plants and genetics for both home farmers and commercial licenses.
Thanks, Daniel. Dale?
Yeah, my name is Dale Hunt. I am a plant scientist, did a bachelor's degree in botany, master's in genetics, PhD in molecular and cellular biology, and then I went to law school. And I've been a patent attorney for 26 years. Apologies to people who've heard this before. I say it a lot, but it's kind of necessary, I guess. As a patent attorney, I've always worked with plant breeders in addition to lots of other kinds of inventors. And I've helped plant breeders protect their inventions all over the world. I think something like 30 countries, and we've done license deals in about 20 countries. I've seen firsthand how companies that have valuable genetics can scale globally on a really big scale just by licensing others to grow their plants. And I know that this can be done in the cannabis industry as world markets open up. I got into cannabis about 8 years ago in a professional sense, and have really enjoyed working with plant breeders. One of my favorite things about my job is just getting to know the independent plant breeders that have been doing it for decades, and seeing their passion and seeing their creative drive, and the fact that they put making better plants and better medicines and helping people way above even making a living. Some of them are doing well and a lot of them aren't. And as I started visiting breeders on their farms, it went from being a really interesting job to being a passion and a cause. And so I started my company, Breeders Best, in order to help cannabis breeders that couldn't afford to patent their own things. If we think that there's something that really has some potential, then the company will pay for the patenting, and in exchange receives an exclusive license. And meanwhile, the breeder always owns the patent, and the license revenues that the company generates go back to the breeder after, obviously it's shared between the breeder and the company. It is a lot like a record label, where the breeder is a creative person making something great, and they get to focus on their creative work, and they don't have to do all of the other things that lie between the creation and the revenues. That's the job of the company. And it's a huge honor to have some members of the Breeders Best team here today. They are every bit as passionate as I am about the plant and about the potential that we have to make a difference. So I'll stop there. I could go on.
Hey, Rob.
Hey, how's it going? My name's Rob Golightly, and I'm a lifelong cannabis activist. I started collecting signatures for Proposition 215 in 1993. I've been growing cannabis and selling it legally in California since over-the-counter sales started around 2006. I've been aligned with collectives that were licensed by the city of Los Angeles since around the same time, and have constantly grown different medical strains out of Humboldt and breeded legacy genetics from different elders that I've been gifted seeds throughout the years. When people pass away and certain things happen, genetics get passed around. And I've also been a big nursery person too before Prop 64 came, so I was doing a lot of clones in Humboldt also, and picking specific varieties that would work for good for not just medical reasons, but also for commercial cultivation, so that they could grow large quantities of it at a time. And we also, I have a distribution company legally now, and I also have a legal 10,000 square foot farm in Honeydew, California, and that was one of the first 100 to get licensed in California.
Thanks, Rob. Great job. So my name is Lelehnia DuBois, or a lot of people know me as Lele, and I'm a second-generation cannabis cultivator and community developer in the Emerald Triangle. I'm also the founder of the Humboldt Grace Legacy Project and CCO of Canopy Right. The Humboldt Grace Legacy Project was formed as a strategy to empower the decades of knowledge around cannabis in the Emerald Triangle. The people who hold this knowledge we call legacy. Our goal was to build a pathway forward to preserve and validate the genetic diversity of these communities, reinventing how the market values the plant and the legacy experience. So today we're going to kind of talk about what are some of the hurdles that's going on with the legacy right now, what are some of the solutions, and then why does it matter to people who are involved in medicine and science. So to start, you guys, why don't we talk about what some of the hurdles we've all seen from our different perspectives. Jeff, do you want to start? I'm going to sit down so I don't fall down.
Sure, I'm happy to start. So my experience is completely different than everyone, well, maybe not Dale, but I think for me, working with cannabis clients, you always saw two things on the jar, right? There's the brand name, and then there's the cultivar name. And it's always pretty clear to me that the brands got paid, that made sense, but the cultivar, what is that? Did the person who invented it get paid? Do we even know who they are? Could we find out? And so, so this is a personal experience sort of with me and a particular client, but also several clients, all with the exact same problem. Well, I've got all of these cultivars. They're really like my most valuable business asset. If I didn't have my seed library, I wouldn't have gotten all of this investment money. I wouldn't be able to build my facility. So you're sitting there, you're having lunch with these clients, and this red light goes off in your head. Well, do you own your cultivars? Do you can you even own your cultivars? And so I ended up in this rabbit hole. But I guess when I'm talking about the hurdles facing the industry right now, it's that it's really hard to document cultivars in a way that makes sense, that allows for the people that spent decades developing those cultivars, including sort of the legacy community, to get paid from it. It just didn't make sense to me. And so I guess that's what I would say is that the hurdle that I've seen.
Not being valued for their work?
Not being valued, and not even not being valued, but there not even being a way to value it.
Right. Daniel, anyone?
Yeah, there's lots of hurdles. For the legacy farmer, I would say the biggest hurdle they have is getting their product to the consumer. There are several supply chain pieces that being removed in a remote location, up in the hills, working with environmentally friendly practices, you have a really long supply chain visit to get us down to LA. So because of that, they're dependent on the distribution networks to sell their product to the farm or to the distribution company that's going to white label it and create something for the retail customer. And to simplify their jobs, the distribution companies focus on singular metric points. They want high THC, they want purple, they want certain specific lead terpenes. And so I see it is really challenging to motivate yourself to preserve diversity in the cannabis gene pool right now, because in order to make a living, you're forced to kind of follow the pathways that you're given, and not being vertically integrated puts a lot of Humboldt farmers at a disadvantage, and I feel like it puts the consumer at a disadvantage, specifically the medical patients, in actually reaching the diversity and the different effects that they want. So I do see that access point being a really big challenge. I would love to see e-commerce and direct-to-consumer opportunities develop for the legacy farmers. And I'll just insert the word heirloom, because there's something that I feel like legacy might not even communicate what we're doing here, which is heirloom. And if you guys go to the grocery store, you'll probably see heirloom tomatoes that cost more and maybe have a better flavor profile, different than your commercially bought tomatoes. So we're at the very beginning here in cannabis where we're trying to hold on to those heirlooms, and we see the agricultural tools that are coming in and the monocropping that's coming in is going to create a period where the consumer isn't going to have access to these heirlooms unless they go and value it. And with that big separation in between the farmers that have preserved these heirlooms and the consumer that maybe doesn't know how the different effects could be curated from these different profiles, there's just a disconnect there, and it would be really nice to see the farmers and the consumers interact again, like actually, sadly before Prop 64, when people were kind of able to work directly with the grower to get exactly what they want. So that's one of the hurdles that I see, is just reaching the consumer.
Well, and the science, like with Dr. Sicily's research, right? Someone mentioned it yesterday, how the research said that, cannabis doesn't really work that well, but she didn't really have access to high quality medicine, right? When
Absolutely.
she came into our community, she was like, I wish I could study it here.
Yeah, Sue Sicily, she's a great example because she's so tough in her nature and refuses to follow that path of these kind of, not diluted, but whatever the DEA has in their library, which doesn't reflect the diversity that, people want to interact with when they want to interact with the plant. So good for her for sticking to that point and kind of refusing to do another study that's really just going to invalidate the truth.
Dale, Rob, do you have anything to add to hurdles? I know you do, Rob.
Well, it was pretty amazing when Sue was in Humboldt and she recognized our legacy genetics. I was there with you a few years ago, and she really did recognize that we are sitting on better medicine to be running tests and trials with the veterans. That's really exciting. But for a legacy farmer, for someone entering the metric right now, and say you were able to pay all the bills and pass all the stipulations of the regulatory process, the biggest problem for a breeder right now is they're not allowing new genetics into the metric in California. And so right now the big buzzword with the DCC was having public comments just a few weeks ago, and a lot of people are upset because they can't get their genetics into metric. And so yeah, we're pretty much locked out right now in California. And also right now in California, we've reached a point where 70% of all the genetics in the metric right now are related to each other. And so, like Daniel was saying just a second ago, I go to the collectives every week. We dispense to probably close to 70 collectives. And the medical selections for diversity of genetics is disgusting. It's no longer a medical, I don't consider it medical marijuana anymore. It's become rec marijuana. And, you know, as we lose the different gene pools, it'll just be becoming more and more rec. And, you know, speaking to the trends of it too, we've watched this purple thing get really trendy where OG was the old trend. And we're already seeing the purple trend fade, and we're seeing the OG trend is about to come back in the next few months. And it's just wild how the market can be dictated by rappers and fancy, you know, commercials.
There's one other thing that I think it's been a problem for the last few years, but I think it's still pretty significant, and that is just the issue of trust. In the old school communities, I think people, and I wasn't part of them, so I can't pretend to speak for them, but my observation is that they knew who they could trust. They trusted their neighbors, they trusted people in their community, and they knew not to trust the government, and they knew they didn't want to deal with lawyers. They didn't want to deal with big companies. And things have gotten really complicated because, and they knew not to you know, interact. They didn't interact much with science and technology companies, somewhat, but not a lot. And things have really gotten shaken up because now I've heard plenty of stories from breeders that have said, yeah, I gave my friend this particular selection to put in his catalog, and I never got paid. I've seen that a lot. I've seen that even recently. People just not getting paid. They think they can trust somebody and then they can't. And then even more distasteful, they might have to somehow trust a lawyer or trust the government to get a patent and to just engage parties they never wanted to engage and to start questioning. It really is hard to figure out who you can trust in this industry. And I like to use the word community, but I think it has, as it's transitioned from community to industry, it's gotten very confusing. I don't know, Sarah, that I have any great solutions for that, but you know, there are lawyers and companies that are trying to be trustworthy, but you can't just, somebody tells you, oh, you should trust me, you probably shouldn't. You got to watch them walk the walk.
But you can trust me when I say trust Dale. Trust Jeff.
Or when we ask Dale why we shouldn't trust him, and then he answers us in front of a bunch of other people.
Just to preface how I view both of these attorneys, I think the word activist is synonymous with lawyer when I picture their identities. And I think that's an important component, that there's an element of activism in genetic preservation in cannabis right now because there isn't money in it. We'll tell you that much.
I want to add one more thing to the hurdles.
Where's the money in cannabis at?
Good question. Is anybody in here making
No,
money?
ask the lawyers.
I think it's in the government, right?
They definitely got the taxes.
Yeah.
I want to add one more thing to the hurdles, and I think that's education. You know, we're talking about genetics, and one of the things that I see as we're building new products and creating all these new things out of this plant, when we're talking about like consumer loyalty and when we're talking about healing people. I'm a patient. I have no L4, L5 and a torn spinal cord. And I really have to understand my medicine to be functionable. And genetics are really important in that conversation when you're trying to heal somebody or when you're trying to make a joint that makes people feel a certain way. And the gap in that is huge, yet these legacy communities literally have, we know people who have been working with this plant for 6 generations. And so bringing those two together, I think is gonna help create a lot more real medicine too, and push the research forward in that. So learning why all this diversity matters.
Yeah.
So, how about solutions?
Solutions. Let somebody else start. These guys, Jeffrey has a solution.
That's right.
I am, believe business is solution. You have to be an activist in your business to try to create solutions. I'm more on the ground. I'm caught in the fight. And I think what Jeff created shows a really good perspective on potential solutions. Because protecting your varieties, if somebody holds something that's very special and has unique cannabinoid profiles that they've worked on for 25 generations of the plant's breeding. So maybe that's 25 years, maybe that's 15 years, but extensive work, and it's really life's work that people pour into these things. So you pour your life's work into something and then you find yourself outside of the commercial sphere. You have to ask yourself, how am I going to get this valuable medicine to somebody, and how do I do that? There's an element of trust that you have to have a partner that you do trust. And I think that people are looking for answers because they are probably evolved now to the point where the right contract or the right agreements probably look pretty enticing in terms of a way to get their medicine to reach people. And Dale and Jeff have both presented solutions that, I'd never considered before. I'll let you guys talk about your agreements and your software, but really exciting.
Yeah, well, I mean, I wouldn't be sitting here if I wouldn't have met Dale, and then you came to me, because we have all these amazing people in our community, and I'm really a community builder, but there was no way to go to folks and say, well, you're protected, especially people like what Daniel's saying that are shut out of the market. We have a lot of breeders I know one breeder in particular who has over 4,000 different cultivars that he's been seed hunting for 60 years. And that's just one person. Yet he has no income. And Jeff came and said, I think I have a solution, and it's this blockchain, and he said something that was also unique, that I want the community's help. I want the breeders to help me make this so it really works for him. And that's how we got started on understanding that there was a solution that we could start building off of out there.
Cool. Should I start talking now?
Yeah.
All right. So in thinking about how cannabis genetic diversity works, I've always thought about comparing it to music and how the music industry works. And so when you think about what a cannabis breeder does when they're developing strains, it's really art, and a cannabis strain is really a work of art. And if we could figure out a mechanism for cannabis breeders to get paid for the commercialization of their cultivars, like artists get paid for their art, then maybe we could create a fairer system that resulted in sort of a more equitable distribution of the profits from this industry, but also gives people an opportunity to protect their work that they've spent decades building. So what we came up with was a system for doing that, and we've been working with the Humboldt Grace Legacy Project. Calls are every Friday at 11. I did your plug for you.
And anyone can come.
And anyone can come. So the main mechanism is to define a cannabis cultivar as an original work. If you have something that you think that you want to commercialize, you can take a cutting of fresh leaf material you can stick it in a tamper-evident package with a QR code, and then you can close the tamper-evident package, take a photo of your sample, and you can keep it in your own freezer. So if you think that somebody ripped you off, you can open up your freezer, you can send your sample to Mike at Medicinal Genomics, and you can sort of determine whether or not you got ripped off. But the value of having your frozen sample and the value of how we're building it through blockchain is that you can build out a profile for your cultivar, and then if you want to enter into a licensing agreement, it's pretty simple to do so. When you think about how the track and trace system works, you have to put a little tag on every single flowering plant in the legal market, and it's bad for the environment, but it's good for inventory control, and the fact that the state is making you do it regardless really presents an opportunity to take this example of licensing cannabis genetics like music to another level. So if you think about a cannabis breeder as an artist and a cannabis strain like a song and a cannabis plant like the equivalent of the play of a song, roughly the same functionality of music streaming services can be applied to cannabis. And so that's what we're building. We're working with the Legacy Project, and that's my story.
In the Legacy Project, we released a white paper, I guess, a couple weeks ago, and what we're taking is all this information to show folks how they can not just secure or protect, but how they can also validate and authenticate their work. And then we're going to have an auction in November to really educate, not just on the hype, but like show, I like to say we're going to show everybody's panties, because instead of saying that we're the best, it's going to be, you're going to look at this and you're going to tell us what you think through the chemical profiles, through the DNA, through the stories that the breeders give. So we can start helping folks look at this plant a little differently and maybe empower the market to come to our communities. Instead of asking for how much weed they have, they'll ask, oh, I want a joint that gives me this kind of experience, or I really need a strain that's high in THCV. And because of what these communities have been doing for so many generations, we already know this is going on. We just have to bridge the gap in that conversation. Dale, so why does this matter to doctors? Doctors, and I love being here. It's so exciting to be a part of a science conference. But why should they listen? Why should they want to talk to folks that are involved or that are from the Legacy experience?
I'm tempted to turn about something that happened yesterday. I was watching my friends back there at the middle table doing a podcast, and they dragged me onto it to participate with them. These are the Breeders' Best folks, Nisha Whiteley, Ethan Rousseau, and Mojave Richmond. Ethan would be the very best person to answer that. Mojave would also give a great answer, and Nisha wrote a book on this stuff. So, but I'll try to speak for them, and then I might hear about it if I get it wrong. But basically, cannabis is a rich, rich source of biochemical diversity, of different molecules that contact the most widely distributed receptor system in the body, and it affects pretty much every function of the body. And given that that's kind of if you think of that as the infrastructure for signaling with medicines to get the body to fix itself or to do something differently, then you've got the plant makes the tools to interact with this infrastructure and to address all kinds of problems. And the real beauty of that is, to use the term that Dr. Rousseau, I believe, coined and is very fond of, it is the entourage effect, which I just think of it as synergy between the interactions of one thing touching a receptor and something else touching a different receptor or interacting with the same receptor. You get really different and sometimes extremely elevated activities at the receptor level because of the interaction of more than one molecule. And I think that's the weakness of single molecule drugs. They don't allow for any synergy. But as soon as you have a whole plant medicine or an extract from a plant and you've got lots of different things that can interact with that receptor system in a synergistic way, in a cooperative way, then you've got the potential for incredibly more powerful medicines at lower doses. So I think that's why doctors should be interested in genetic diversity in cannabis, because if everything you've got out there has the same 2 or 3 terpenes and the same 1 or 2 or 3 cannabinoids, then you're limiting yourself. And it's like you walk into a library and you stop at the first shelf and you pull off the first couple books and you walk back out. That's a huge underutilization of this vast potential. So I think that the genetic diversity, the biochemical diversity, and the potential that we have to, with the help of the great legacy breeders, as well as molecular technologies, to develop plants that really can provide new and extremely powerful medicines that are extremely safe, is a promise that is going to revolutionize the health of everybody on Earth.
Well said.
Grandiose.
Should we stop there?
Yeah, it's done.
Anyone else?
Ethan might be smiling under his mask. He might be frowning.
Yeah, the different varieties I think are really important, and evaluating your medicine based on the effects I think is something that's just totally underutilized right now. I don't know if the consumer really responds to, okay, either I'm high or I'm not high. That's a very like binary vision of cannabis, and that if you drink a glass of wine versus a glass of beer versus a margarita or a shot of tequila, you're gonna feel different based on those inputs. And cannabis has an even wider range of effects that it can have. And so just to touch on a few, Ringo's Gift, high CBD cultivar, nearly unmarketable in the commercial market. There are mothers that say they've heard their children say mom for the first time in 3 years by utilizing the plant. We will do anything to make that person feel better, whether there's money involved or not. Blue Skunk and Orange Cream Frost, 2 cultivars, one bred for PTSD, the Blue Skunk, Orange Cream Frost bred for its beauty and its aroma. The Orange Cream Frost will level you. It will shut you down, you will stop talking, you'll go inside your head, and the Blue Skunk will make you, on a day where you're just having a bad day, blow off the thing that really doesn't matter, that is stressing you out. So we went to a podcast, and the breeder brought these 2 herbs, and the order was that the podcast interviewees were gonna smoke the 2 strains and talk about it. They smoked the Blue Skunk, they had a great interview, and then they smoked the Orange Cream Frost, and he went catatonic. He did not say one thing until the sound engineer just shut it down. Okay, it's over. That's the power of those genetics, and if you choose the really purple flashy one, you might get leveled when you really want the bright green one that's gonna make you feel really good for the day. And then to touch on one more, and the cannabinoids and the minor cannabinoids, is Pink Boost Goddess, where it is documented as the highest THCV, so tetrahydrocannabivarin, maybe I got that right. That is a rare cannabinoid that some labs can't even distinguish between THC and THCV. So we might be missing the whole point when we look at, oh, this thing's got 22%. It might have 10% and 7% THCV and 2% THCP, which there are still undiscovered cannabinoids here. So the diversity and the preservation is super important, and the doctor should be looking at the necessity of that. We need a data bank or a bank where all these genetics exist, and we should be inviting the home growers to pull all the seeds out of their, forbidden closets and preserve these things. And I will go further to say it shouldn't be any government entity that holds those data banks. It should be the community that holds them.
Here, here.
Rob, I know you got some stuff to add.
Following up with Dan, the cannabis plant is the only plant on Earth that holds every single terpene profile on Earth. And so I think that there's a huge research to do with just the variances of all the different terpenes that are out there. And definitely, we're going to find terpenes that might only have 100 seeds left that represent that terpene profile at somebody's house that was growing it 50 years ago. And definitely locking our data into blockchain is a way to preserve this quickly. It's something that I had a friend that's been doing NFTs for almost 4 years now, and he was, telling me that I should try to find out something that can connect with cannabis, and it was easily the first thing I figured out was we could lock our DNA codes into the blockchain so that we can't get them stolen and we can claim them so no one else can ever claim them. And then second, I had the idea that if we could create contracts just for selling cannabis so that we could control circumvention in the metric and create contracts that we could read the metric. And sure enough, somebody in our group created a smart contract before I could get a hold of my coder friend to tell him to do it. And we have a contract that can read metric, which I think is really invaluable to small cultivators to make sure that we can watch and track where our things are and make sure people don't steal them and take them a ride.
All right, thanks you guys. Does anyone have any questions of anybody on the panel up here?
Come on.
Hey, Eric.
There's a mic.
Then they can record it, I think.
Yeah, do the mic. I can't hear.
Yeah, I can't either.
Hi, guys. Thanks for being down here. My question is, I was wondering if you could actually just run through what the parts of a transaction, like what that would look like. Like somebody sees a cultivar, they're interested, a client. So how does that, could you just sort of go through an analogy of what that looks like and the different pieces, how that comes together?
In how it's happening now or through Canopy, right, what we've developed?
Well, through your, I guess it's still in beta, so I don't think it's operating at this point, but when it does launch, what would that, how would that look? With like somebody licensing, what would that look like?
Canopy Right is the engine is built, and now the 2.0 design is coming out thanks to Kelsey, so it's really user friendly. But do you want to answer that, Jeff?
Yeah, I'll answer that. So the way that it works isn't dissimilar. So it's similar to how it works now, except for one important change. So the way that it works is if a grower wants to grow a cultivar from a breeder, we have them negotiate a price on a per plant basis. And once there's an agreement and there's a mechanism for negotiation, the negotiation follows a few different paths. So one is the price per plant. Again, we invoice based on the flowering plant tags that are on each plant when they're entered into the track and trace system. But that's really only one aspect of a transaction, right? Because you're not just buying a plant, you're also buying how you grow that plant. And so we sort of create a space for people to input cultivation requirements, quality standards, late fees, sort of. It's not just what you're charging per plant, it's what you're charging per plant to get the cultivar that the breeder wants to be in the market. But once that happens, it's when the cultivar's flowering plants are entered into the track and trace system, we pull that data and then we generate an invoice based on the agreed upon price per plant. We are tracking it, periodically, and then we invoice on a monthly basis. That's the basic mechanism, but I think it probably helps to talk about the privacy aspects of it, because I think that that's, a thing that is a problem in the industry right now is there's a lot of trust issues, and also there's a lot of experience. I know Rob was talking about it, but everyone has a story of how they've been ripped off, and so we want to just create a system that is completely private if users want it to be private.
And if I could just, I am often asked about the difference between Canopy Right and patents, and I think it's helpful to explain the two, because I think they're really compatible. And I am a big supporter of Canopy Right, even though I'm a patent attorney. So one of the things people ask me is my plant new enough to patent? Is it different enough that I can get a patent on it? And the answer is, if you bred it, it is different enough. It'll qualify for a patent. We can get you a patent. The real question that you should be asking instead is this plant worth patenting? Because there's no super inexpensive way to patent it. It's going to cost you by the time you're finished, it's going to cost at least $10,000 and maybe closer to $30,000 to get it patented. Now, if you've got something that's going to take the world by storm and it'll be commercially viable for a decade or two, then that's just a rounding error on the rounding error. It's not going to be a significant amount of the value of that plant. But there are a lot of things that people want to be able to commercialize without hiring a lawyer, without spending that kind of money, and with extremely quick, efficient transactions. And that's what I love about Canopy Right. It lets people skip the whole lawyer thing and go straight into commercial transactions. And then Canopy Right notifies them that, okay, look, as soon as you do a transaction, you are starting a patent deadline for yourself. You need to, if you want to get a patent on this, you need to act within a year. And so these are systems that I think are very compatible, and it's a great solution for people who don't want to spend the money on a patent. And then another solution for people who don't want to spend the money on a patent is Breeders Best, because we pay for the patent work, the breeder owns it, but we have to be pretty selective. We can't protect nearly as many cultivars as Canopy Right can handle, because there is so much cost associated with it. So it's only when we see something that we think we could put all over the world and really have an impact for a long time, that's when we say, okay, yeah, we'll commit to this, we'll spend the money on this, and with confidence that it will end up producing enough revenues that the breeder can really benefit from it and that we can recoup our investment in it as well. So they are different systems, but I think they're highly compatible, and it opens up a form of protection to a lot more plant varieties.
The last thing I would say is just full disclosure. So the registration functionality we're not charging for, and we will never charge for. It's just an essential service that we think that we're going to be providing. So we're going to charge a royalty fee when people enter into business transactions with each other, because we wrote your contract for you, and I'm a lawyer, that's what I do. But we are trying to offer the system of, creating a registration of a cultivar, and we're trying to do it for free.
And just the model that they're discussing, I mean, our business has used that exact licensing model since its inception to economically empower breeders. So things like the blueberry muffin and other varieties were curated with these concepts at the very beginning, that we didn't want to share that without empowering the breeder. And I think that it's a great first step to, asserting your value over your genetics is to put them into Canopy Right and say, I'm going to take the first step to acknowledge the value here. And I also want to say how cool it is that they use the tampering-proof bags, which are kind of like an evidence police thing. And I just think that's, the irony there is really awesome. So great design.
Thanks.
Yeah, and like Daniel kind of mentioned, the whole licensing agreement idea isn't a new concept. It just wasn't very accessible. And what Jeff has created has made it accessible so we can build on that. Hi, Evian.
Hey, well, I believe the gentleman over here had a question.
She had one too.
Well, I think she had a question maybe even before, so I would make sure.
Come on.
I work with them, so you could go ahead.
Well, thank you. I apologize for being the last question then. So I think that you all and the other talks this week have done a really good job of highlighting that, the medical benefits of cannabis are probably really come from having this diversity in the cultivars and having many terpenes and different profiles. And even from the adult use perspective, I think that's really important, right, in producing the different effects that the consumer might be looking for. But right now there's this huge proliferation of synthetically derived cannabinoids like Delta-8 and HHC, and obviously those are being driven from a certain economic perspective, and the fact that cannabis is illegal in many places, so it's convenient to then gain access to something that will get you high or whatever. But I heard someone yesterday, and I've heard at many other conferences, that people think that the biosynthetic derived from yeast, or again, these laboratory-derived cannabinoids are perhaps a huge player in the future of the cannabis market. But they seem to be pretty threatening to, trying to maintain this diversity that is actually relevant to medicine and to, again, consumer satisfaction, I think. So I just wondered what all your thoughts are. Do they really have a place in the future of cannabis? And if they do, how does it all balance out so that we don't lose what you are all trying to preserve?
Thank you, great question. Anyone want to take that?
I mean, my brief research into Delta-8 and the other cannabinoids definitely is because, they're not letting, THC across state borders. We have plenty of THC to serve people across the country. But I have seen that there's research that shows that it does do combinations with THC, and people do get good effects from taking Delta-8 with THC added. And there's brands in the metric market in California now that have been adding Delta-8 in the last 6 months to a year that I've noticed coming out online. So it's definitely being used in California even.
And from a patient's perspective, I've always said whatever works, but what I've learned over the years, and I've watched us, is we're getting closer and closer to more. I was raised by a midwife, and she was very much a naturopath in the way she took care of her patients. And I was a nurse, and I really thought science knew everything. And what I've seen the past 2 days is that science is starting to validate what indigenous studies, indigenous medicines, and plant medicines is known for centuries. We just haven't had the tools to define those, and I see science defining those things, not really changing it. So maybe this plant will help us realize that we don't need all those chemical things, and that plant medicine might have a little more power than we've given it credit to.
Yeah.
Evian?
Oh, sorry, go ahead.
I would love to just hear if the panel could speak to the work that the Ethical Data Alliance has been doing for the past 2.5 years, and how all of these projects kind of tie together with that, and the Eden protocol with the blockchain, and just how it's a kind of a gift back to the community, and also the ethical gatekeeper of everything that we're doing.
Well, I just met the Ethica Data Alliance about, 8 months ago, but I'm very familiar with Phylos and all of that. And Dale and I went to a meeting that Dale was at, and I was actually invited to meet Dale about 4 years ago, before COVID, and I said, oh no, I can't go there because my community won't trust me, it's Dale Hunt. And so I got invited to a small group meeting, and I was able to ask him, you seem great, I appreciate what you have to say, but why am I told that maybe you're the big bad devil trying to steal all our genetics? And he gave me a really good answer. And then he saw what some of us, Daniel and I, have been talking about for quite a few years, is creating this auction and how it could tell a story and help empower these small farmers. And he said, Lele, I want to help you out, and I'm going to be your pro bono attorney. And he said, you need to go into the EDA. I am not a technologist. I'm not a breeder. I am a cultivator. I know the plant very well. And I'm not a scientist. And what I am is a community builder, and I didn't know much about blockchains. And I went into the EDA and I just said, look, you guys, I'm told that you're trying to protect our IP. Here's what I think I'd like to do, help. And really quickly, Jeff came to the table, another gentleman, Caleb, came to the table, another gentleman, Jason with QualScore, came to the table and said, look, we think we have solutions. And the Ethica Data Alliance is really like, the mothership. I see them as the mothership helping this entire industry preserve and protect their IP through all these technologies, and helping us through the Humboldt Grace Legacy Project, because we're really about community and the plant, ensure that we're doing the right thing through these technologies and through our communities. And so they're really a really great resource, I think, for anybody in the industry who is looking at innovative ways to use blockchain and crypto technologies to empower themselves and their communities in more ways than genetics. It definitely is an amazing organization, and we would not be where we are right now, and this project is like going like wildfire. Locally, we have a lot of support, and I mean, we would not be here. I would not know Jeff, and now I have the pleasure of working with Jeff with Canopy Right if it was not for the EDA. So please, if you think you have IP that you need to preserve and protect, go to their meetings because that's what they're doing. Anyone else want to add to that? I mean, you two are on the board.
There's a donation button on the website. It's a nonprofit. We have one paid person on the EDA, and he works really hard, and we need that funding. So please, any donation, large or small, would be greatly appreciated.
Yeah, the EDA for me is the network that has brought us all together. Absolutely, that I met Dale in 2019 here at CannMed after a really inspiring panel that he gave, and I was fortunate enough to speak as well. And we connected, and the EDA kept us together. So Ethical Data Alliance is my favorite group of cannabis nerds that care about the good guys and the little guys, and it was formed in the wake of kind of some nefarious acts by, you know, a well-known cannabis DNA sequence collecting company, not Medicinal Genomics or LeafWorks.
I want to also add another reason that we're at this stage and here today is because of Medicinal Genomics. Brendan, Kevin, and Mike have been at our Friday calls. In fact, I don't think they've missed one of our Friday calls as Medicinal Genomics. And have been really supportive, and I want to thank you guys for inviting us here to have this conversation. It's a great opportunity. Thank you. And thank you everyone for showing up for us.